everyone, and welcome back to Mariana Mas Books. My name is Mariana, and today I am here with another non-fiction related video in honor, of course, of Nonfiction November. So today I am going to share with you 5 books that have actually changed me or confronted me with myself. There is this very common question of what book has changed your life, or maybe we even say it. If there is a book that we really enjoyed, we might say, oh, this book changed my life. But sometimes we are being hyperbolic, or we feel that they change our life, but they didn't actually change it in a practical way, or they didn't make us actually make a change in our lives, whether that's an actual practical impact or a change within ourselves. I thought it would be fun today to share with you non-fiction books that actually have impacted me in a way that have made me make change in my life, as I said, in an external or practical way, or make change within myself, or confronted me with ideas that I have, or with thoughts, or yes, confronted me with myself. These are books that I have read through the years, so some of them aren't recent. So take into consideration that these aren't necessarily recommendations, in the sense that the ones that I have read a while ago, I'm not sure if they hold up. Maybe they were impactful in the time that I read them, and also because they changed me in personal ways. I feel that that type of change within ourselves is a very personal thing that might depend on our life, our circumstances, etc. So a book that has changed me won't necessarily change you. However, I did enjoy all of these books, so if you like the sound of any of them, or if you feel that they sound interesting, then look into them, because yes, I did enjoy them at the time that I read them, and you should definitely check them out if they sound interesting to you. With that being said, I am going to start with a book that I read probably about 10 years ago. So it's the one that I've read the longest time ago, but it's always the book that I think of when I think of books that have changed me, that have impacted my life. My Stroke of Insight, A Brain Scientist's Journey, or A Brain Scientist's Personal Journey, by Jill Bolte Taylor. Jill Bolte Taylor is a doctor in neuroanatomy, and when she was how old was she? I don't remember how old she was. About 37, I think. I'm going to write in the screen what age she was, but she suffered from an ictus to her brain, so a stroke to her brain, specifically the left side of her brain. Because she is a neuroanatomist, she could tell that she was having a stroke while she was having it, so she could act quickly and get help before anything fatal happened, and they were able to save her life with a surgery. But of course, after that surgery, she had to go through a long period of recovery, and that's what she talks about mainly in the book. The book is interesting not only because of her personal journey, but because she is a scientist, specifically a scientist of the brain. Then it's very interesting how she approaches the subject of her recovery, both from a personal and a scientific perspective. So she will tell you what she learned in a personal level, but also her journey is informed through what she knows as a scientist. I don't know if I read it now, if it would have the same impact, just because I have read many memoirs of the sort since then, and I have read many quote-unquote self-help books since I read that one, so I don't know how much I would find it original, so to speak, but at the time it was the first type of, as I said, self-help type of book that I had read. I come from a family of academics, so self-help is not necessarily very well respected. There is a lot of intellectual snobbery, and I'm going to say it as it is, in my family, and so I had never even thought about reading a book like that. As you know, I had a brain tumor myself, so I went through a brain surgery, and I went through a long period of recovery after a brain surgery. So I really saw myself in her story, and I actually read that book because I was, at the moment, I was going through my recovery process. I went to a bookstore, and I happened to find that bookstore in the new releases table. I saw it, I read the back, and I immediately knew I wanted to read it because I saw myself in her story, because I myself was recovering from a brain surgery and was going through a very hard time. And because she is a doctor in neuroanatomy and it had that scientific element, then it made it justifiable for me. Just to clarify, I don't judge self-help now. I love self-help type books and memoirs of the sort, because I know they really helped me. But at the time, I had never read one, and as I said, there is a lot of intellectual snobbery in my family, so when I saw it was a self-helpy type book, but written by a scientist, then in my mind, it was like, oh, okay, then it's not so bad, so I can read it, and I can read it without feeling bad, which I know is ridiculous, but that's how I felt 10 years ago, thanks to my family. So people, don't judge your families for what they read or what they want to read. Anyway, so that's why I read it, and you can tell that it was very impactful just for that fact alone, that it was my first book of that type. It impacted me firstly because it showed me that I could read and that I had a need for self-help books at that moment in my life, and that there was nothing wrong with those types of books, that there is nothing wrong with seeking help in whatever form. It made me realize that I myself could also write about my experience. I always loved writing since I was a little girl, and that opened up an area of possibilities for me, of realizing that, wait a minute, so this is actually something that people do and that they can do and that they can get published for it. And it opened my eyes to looking at my recovery process in a new way from that perspective, but also the recovery process in itself. Reading about her recovery, reading about what she went through, reading about how people treated her, reading about her needs. I was feeling all of those things. So I felt seen while reading the book. I felt like I had someone who understood me, and I wanted everyone I knew to read that book so they could understand what I was going through. Finally, because she's a scientist, she gives different facts about the brain that were incredibly helpful for me, that actually, as I said, made me make changes in my life based on that information. So for that reason, this book is the first book that I remember being really, truly impactful in my life, in my adult life, I should say, because there were probably books that impacted me or changed me when I was younger, when I was a girl, when I was a teenager, but in my adult life, this is the first book I can say that actually impacted me to the point of creating a change in me. The second book I'm going to talk about is Strangers Drowning, Grappling with Impossible Idealism, Drastic Choices, and the Overpowering Urge to Help, by Larissa MacFarquhar. This book was another book that I came across in the bookstore. I had never heard of it. I have actually never seen anyone speak of this book. It was in a random table in a bookstore. I saw it and I said I need to read this. To give you a bit of a background about my life, I went to a Catholic school, specifically a Jesuit school. The main motto, let's put it like that, the main teaching is to be for others. So your life devoted to others, serve others. That's something that has been drilled into me since I've been a little girl, like since forever. So it's a very profound part of my life, like it's deeply rooted in my life. So when I saw the subtitle of the book and I read the back of the book, I knew I had to read it. So basically this book is an analysis of, as the book calls them, do-gooders. So people that want to help, people that want to do good. So in different chapters of the book, each chapter follows a different do-gooder in a different area. So you get the story of this couple that adopted a lot of foster kids. You get a story of an environmentalist, vegetarian, who was very involved in animals' rights. So you have different stories like that about, as the book calls them, do-gooders, and analyzing what it is to be a do-gooder and what it means to be a do-gooder, and when being a do-gooder actually harms more than helps. Kind of like this analysis of how when you help from your own perspective, you are not really being helpful, you are not really being of service, and you might even be damaging a community because you are inserting yourself in a community from your own circumstances and your own perspectives and your own points of view without necessarily knowing the community's beliefs or perspectives or what they really want or need. So it's basically this concept of being like a white savior, that type of thing. It confronted me with this idea of I guess I would consider myself a do-gooder in the definition of this book, and so it confronted me with what does that mean, what I'm doing, the people around me, etc. I'm going to share a couple of quotes from this book just so you know, because they truly are powerful. That's the only way I can describe it. So I'm going to share a couple of quotes. This quote that I'm going to share comes out of a speech that Austrian priest, and social critic Ivan Illich delivered to young Americans in Mexico in 1968. So this comes from the speech of this priest and social critic, and it says, "If you insist on working with the poor, if this is your vocation, then at least work among the poor who can tell you to go to hell." That quote just like poof, hit me in the stomach. "It is incredibly unfair for you to impose yourselves on a village where you are so linguistically deaf and dumb that you don't even understand what you are doing or what people think of you. And it is profoundly damaging to yourselves when you define something that you want to do as good, as sacrifice and help. I am here to challenge you to recognize your inability, your powerlessness, and your incapacity to do the good which you intended to do." So you can see how it confronts you. It's full of quotes like that, it's full of stories like that, and it also has, as I said, quotes and analysis of what it means to be a do-gooder and how it impacts you as well as the do-gooder in question. So for example, here is a quote that says, "What do-gooders lack is not happiness but innocence. They lack that happy blindness that allows most people, most of the time, to shut their minds to what is unbearable. Do-gooders have forced themselves to know, and keep on knowing, that everything they do affects other people, and that sometimes, though not always, their joy is purchased with other people's joy. And remembering that, they open themselves to a sense of unlimited, crushing responsibility. So, yes, if you identify as a do-gooder, if those quotes resonated with you, I pick up this book. So continuing on with this same theme of and speaking of my Jesuit education, I am going to mention a book that is more, let's say, more religiously focused. So you can I was going to say you can fast forward this part of the video if you are not religious or you are not a Catholic, but don't, because it's very interesting. Just, you know, you don't have to listen to it, you don't have to read it, but it did impact me a lot. And this one, again, was a surprising find in a bookstore. I am sensing a pattern here. This book is The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything, A Spirituality for Real Life by James Martin. This particular book is just like a general book about Ignatian spirituality. I picked the book up because of the cover. When I saw this cover in the bookstore, in a table, I remember exactly, I was in a Barnes and Noble in Boston, Massachusetts, in the Barnes and Noble in Kenmore Square. If you are from Boston, Massachusetts, I was in that Barnes and Noble, and I was there visiting one of my friends. I lived for 1 year in, or 2 years actually, but separately, in Boston with my family while my dad was doing a sabbatical year. And one of my friends was living in Boston that year, so I went to visit her. And we went to that Barnes and Noble. It was one of our favorites when I lived there because we took the bus from Kenmore a lot of times to our house, so that while we were waiting for the bus, we spent a lot of time in that particular Barnes and Noble. So I remember precisely being in the Barnes and Noble, seeing this book in the table, and knowing I just absolutely had to buy this book. I mean, you don't understand. Like, I went to a Jesuit school all my life, like since first grade in elementary school all the way to high school, and then I studied in a Jesuit university. Jesuits are a big part of my life. My dad worked like 25 years in a Jesuit university. My parents have friends who are Jesuits. So when I saw this book in the table, I saw that the Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything, and in the back cover, it says San Ignatius to the rescue, and I just, oh my god, I couldn't not buy this book. Like, I had to buy it just to have that cover in my bookshelves. But the book itself was actually really amazing as well. While I was preparing this video, I was looking for quotes to share with you guys, and I'm just going to show you the amount of tabs that I have in this book. Like, it was so hard to find one quote to share with you because it was tremendously helpful for me. After my surgery and after all of the things that went with my recovery, all of that, I kind of like steered away from Catholicism. Not that I stopped being a Catholic, not that I ever considered myself an atheist or a non-believer, but I wasn't like that active in Catholicism, if you know what I mean. I'm still not that active in like ritual social stuff, so it's I don't go to church every Sunday, that type of thing. But this book made me have like a reconnection with my faith on a personal level. So as I said, I don't go to church every Sunday, but that doesn't mean for me that I am not practicing my faith, because for me it's a much more internal thing. And this book did that, and it gave me tools, and it gave me a lot to think about, and it sort of rekindled my love, or started my love for the Catholic faith, because I mean, I was educated in the Catholic faith. Most people in Mexico are. So it wasn't that I actively chose it. It's something that I've known all my life. This book kind of like made me actively say, yes, I like it. I want to keep going with this. I'm just going to share a couple of quotes. One, because it's like a gist of what Jesuit spirituality means, and because I'm a fan of the Jesuits, and I'm always like telling everyone like, but they're so cool, like really they're not like Catholic priests. So I want to read to you this quote just so you get an idea of the gist of what Ignatian spirituality is. And the other quote, if I wasn't scared of tattoos, if I wasn't scared of getting a tattoo, I would get a tattoo with that quote, the second one that I'm going to read to you. So yes, I'm going to share these two quotes. Ignatian spirituality considers everything an important element of your life. That includes religious services, sacred scriptures, prayer, and charitable works, to be sure. But it also includes friends, family, work, relationships, sex, suffering, and joy, as well as nature, music, and pop culture. Essentially, like the main idea is you find God in all things. That is one of like the phrases of Jesuit. You find God in all things. And all things, as the quote says, yes, it can be in scripture, in prayer, in mass, etc. But it can also mean in friendship, in sex, in pop culture, in movies, whatever. So you find God in all things. That is the basic premise of Ignatian spirituality. If you're not particularly religious, you could say you find spirituality in all things. All things are spiritual. Passionately loving a TV show can be a spiritual experience. And the next quote that I'm going to share with you comes from almost the end of the book, so it's fitting. I'm sharing one from the beginning of the book and one from the ending of the book. And again, if you are not religious, you can just take the religious connotations out, but the meaning itself, I feel like anyone can keep that for themselves. It says, you need to maintain a healthy tension between acceptance and desire. On the one hand, you honor the person God made. You can substitute you honor the person you are instead of God made if you are not religious. On the one hand, you honor the person God made with your background, personality, talents, skills, and strengths. On the other, you allow God to move you in new directions, or if you're not religious, you allow yourself to change. You allow God to move you in new directions, to change, to grow, and to discover who you are meant to be. God has created something wonderful in you, but God is still creating. I've always thought that if I wasn't afraid of getting tattoos, I would get a tattoo that said God is still creating, in honor of this, like this tension between honoring who you are and allowing yourself to change, and this idea that God created something wonderful in you, but God is still creating. So you are never a finished product, so to speak. So yes, this book. I love this book. I am definitely rereading this book. Then I'm going to talk about, and this is a very personal one, With the End in Mind, Dying, Death, and Wisdom in an Age of Denial, by Kathryn Mannix. Kathryn Mannix is a doctor and she works in a hospice in palliative care. Palliative care is usually associated with people who are going to die, but that's not necessarily the case. As Kathryn Mannix explains in this book, palliative care means managing symptoms. So you could have a disease that is not terminal and go to a hospice to have palliative care to help you manage your symptoms. However, it is mostly related to terminal illnesses, or that's what people think of it. And this book in particular is about patients with terminal illnesses and about the idea of dying. The title of the book is With the End in Mind, Dying, Death and Wisdom in an Age of Denial. And the basic idea of this book is that we need to talk about death, we need to think about death, we need to not shy away from death. I guess I can sum up what this book is about in this quote, like literally from almost the end of the book. And it says, living is precious and perhaps it's best appreciated when we live with the end in mind. So that's the basic premise. You live better when you have the end in mind. And it talks about how we, as science and medicine has become more advanced, we have increasingly been more and more scared of death, and whereas in the past dying was the most natural thing in the world and everyone died all the time around you, now it's like this dirty word that you don't want to say. I'm sure you also all the mooks and gripes tag videos that were about bucket list book tags, and I want to challenge you to find one of those videos where the person making the video actually says that a bucket list is books you want to read before you die. Most people said something like, when we shy away from this mortal coil, or pass to the other plane, or any other euphemism, because we are so afraid of saying death, like we are going to die, I'm going to die, I'm dying, you're dying, he's dying, like we are so afraid to say it. At a particular moment of when I read this book, I was myself very scared of dying. I guess being afraid of death, I guess it's a natural human thing, but I was particularly, it was a particular scenario. I was scared of dying in my next surgery, which was going to happen in a few weeks when I read this book. I have had many surgeries in the past. I have had many major surgeries, brain surgeries, spine surgeries, kidney surgeries, surgeries, complicated surgeries, big surgeries, major surgeries, scary surgeries. But for some reason, don't ask me why, the surgery I had before my last surgery was going to be a brain surgery, and I don't know why, but I had this feeling. I was convinced that I was going to die in that surgery. I was convinced that I was not going to wake up. Don't ask me why. I'm not going to go into that in detail because this is booktube and it's a fun place for me and I want to keep it that way. But that is why I picked up this book. I was reading a lot about dying, about death, about grappling with the idea of dying, etc. And this book honestly, truly helped me with that. After reading this book, I can honestly tell you that I had a sense of relief that, of course, it's not like I was like, okay, I'm ready to die, yeah, whatever. I don't think anyone ever is. But I wasn't terrified as I was before I read the book. Every episode is a different patient she had, and through the story of that patient, she explains a concept or a particular idea that she wants us to think about. One of the patients she talks about was a young man, maybe he was even a teenager, I don't remember, with cancer, and he was terminally ill. He was going to die and he was terrified of dying. She worked through that fear with him, and he came to realize that what was most scary to him was the unknown and all of the things that he couldn't control, and what was going to happen, and la la la, and am I going to be in the hospital? Am I going to be in my house? What's going to happen? Am I going to be in pain? Am I not? Like all of those kinds of things. So basically what she did with him was that she worked through like a death folder where he planned his death. And in these times of society where death is this dirty word, planning your death sounds like even like a morbid thing to do, when in fact it was treated such a natural and healthy thing to do. Kathryn Mannix talks about how when older parents are wanting to discuss maybe their will with their kids, they'll always be like, no, you're not dying, like stop it, why do you want to talk about your will, don't be morbid, that type of thing, when it's actually very healthy to do, to prepare yourself from something that you know is going to happen, and take care of your loved ones when you know that you're no longer going to be there. Wanting to prepare for that is natural, and we shouldn't scold people for wanting to do it. This death folder, what he did was basically control everything that was in his hands to control. There's a ton of things you can't control, but one thing he could control was the circumstances. So the things that he could plan, like if he wanted to be in the hospital or not, if he wanted to have extreme measures or not, what he wanted to happen with his stuff, like all the types of things, right? So he planned the things that he was able to plan, and that is something that his healthcare providers helped him with, to put together this folder where he planned his death. And when I read that, I thought, wow, everyone should have this. People who help them prepare for their deaths in the healthcare system. Like, that should be a thing in every country. It's definitely not a thing in Mexico, and it should be, and I wish it was. Anyway, so read this book. This one I read like 2 years ago, I think, so it's more recent, and I can most definitely recommend it. And the final book I want to talk about is The Art of Asking, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Let People Help, by Amanda Palmer, who is a musician. This book, the cover and the subtitle and the synopsis and the marketing, I guess, of the book is very quote-unquote self-helpy. It's very much like, oh, I'm going to learn how to ask for help. I'm going to learn how to, it's not. It is about asking for help, yes. But if you want a book about learning how to ask for help, how to not be so self-conscious about asking for help when you feel bad, or at work, or to your family, this is not the book. The focus of this book, more than personal, it's much more business-like. So rather than asking for help as a person, is asking for help as an entrepreneur. She talks specifically from her point of view as a musician who is an independent musician. She works exclusively through crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, that type of thing. She has created albums through Kickstarter campaigns, and she makes a living currently through Patreon. So that's how she earns money, through Patreon. She talks a lot about that, about Patreon, about crowdsourcing, about crowdfunding, and in an excellent way. So for example, my main job is I work independently. I am a speaker, I'm a teacher, that type of, as Gretchen McCulloch says, weird internet career. I have a weird internet career. So I rely on other people wanting to willingly give me their money in exchange for my services to make a living. And because I am a do-gooder, because I am a Catholic, because I am all the things that I talked about when I talked about previous books, asking for help is something that is hard for me, and asking for money is even harder. My dad is also a teacher, but he works in like formal education, so he has a salary, but he also he's a speaker at conferences. They invite him for other conferences, and he doesn't like asking for money, because money is kind of like, this, like, oh no, like, that's a bad thing to do kind of thing. So I grew up with that. So you can imagine, that's my job. Teaching is my job. Publicly speaking is my job. And I have a hard time asking for money to do what I do for work, to earn a living. Because asking for money is viewed as a wrong thing. This book helped me with that. This book actually helped me make a Patreon when I was super scared of doing what. I am just going to share one quote so you can get an idea. American culture in particular has instilled in us the bizarre notion that to ask for help amounts to an admission of failure. But some of the most powerful, successful, admired people in the world seem, to me, to have something in common. They ask constantly, creatively, compassionately, and gracefully. That is a book that really helped me, and if it sounded like something you need help with, I really truly recommend this book. I think it should be required reading for anyone who is working independently, freelancing, whether you want to crowdsource or not. If you are independent or freelance, I would highly recommend this book. Okay, we reached the end of the video. Yes, those are the 5 books that have actually changed me or confronted me with myself. I hope you found a book you are interested in, or if not, I hope you found interesting to hear about the books that have changed me. I would love to know if there is a book that has changed you in a particular way. Tell me in the comments. If not, then we'll see each other or you'll see me in the next bookish video. I hope you have happy reading, and I hope you are having a great non-fiction November, and have a good week.